Hello, everyone. Love and blessings. Welcome to another episode of Dragonfly Heart Medicine Radio. And of course, I'm your host, Kristen, Reiki Master Teacher, Plant Medicine Integrator, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And obviously, I am the lead of this podcast. And so I'm looking forward to our conversation today with a lovely Facebook friend of mine who specializes in several things, but one of them is plant medicine integration, which I think is really important to be talking about, hence why I had her on the show. But if you just want to go ahead and tell us your name and a little bit about you and what inspired you to say yes to the podcast today.
Absolutely. So my name is Yuleisy Cardoso. That's Lacey with a U in front of it. And a little bit about myself. So I have a master's degree in marriage and family therapy and mental health therapy, and a certificate in integration therapy and psychedelic integration therapy. I'm a published author in my field on the topics of loving kindness meditation to help couples heal from an infidelity. You can find that online. And as well, I'm a published author in my community on the topics of mindfulness and how it rewires the brain. Let's see. So the question was,
so why are you here?
In addition to integration work with individuals, I also host small ceremonies through my church, Tigress Temple, one-on-one ceremonies and very small intimate group ceremonies as well with psilocybin. I trained with a curandera in Mexico and healed with her as well. And so it was such a powerful experience that I wanted to help others and bring this knowledge to others. Now, when I did train with her, I didn't get any integration whatsoever. So I had to figure that out on my own, how to integrate what I was downloading from the medicine. And what prompted me to participate in the podcast was really bringing knowledge of this to the masses. You know, I think there are a lot of people out there that don't know of the medicine. And as we were talking about earlier, there are a lot of people that may not know where to find integration therapists and coaches, or don't know the importance of integration or what integration is. So.
Absolutely. And I was recently having a conversation with someone about medicine work and kind of that once we begin that relationship with the medicine, you know, whether it's ayahuasca or bufo or combo or mushrooms or peyote, San Pedro, any of those, it's like we almost have this responsibility to share the wisdom of the plants with the world. And so I think that's
receptive, right?
Yeah, exactly what you're doing is taking what you learned. And I love that you kind of had a little bit of a rough initiation almost into this work because you had to learn the importance of integration, kind of how to do that on your own. And now, having gone through that process, you're able to give that back to other people. You're able to help them with that integration piece so they don't have to be alone or confused or overwhelmed. And so in the spiritual community, in the plant medicine community, the term integration is thrown around so much. I don't know how many times I've heard integration, but not everybody really, I think, explains what that means. So when you're talking about integration for you, what does that mean and what does that look like?
Okay, so for me, what integration looks like is knowing how to integrate the knowledge that you've received from the medicine into your everyday life. So for example, if you have an experience where you've connected with Christ consciousness and you're talking to Jesus and he's giving you all of these beautiful messages, well, how do we take that download and integrate it now into our everyday? So what that would look like for me is helping you see, you know, how can we look at our lives through the lens of this Christ consciousness, through the lens of love and compassion in our everyday. So if you're struggling with something, how can you look at that through those lenses now that you've downloaded that information? And you know you're feeling it because you've connected with the medicine. So you're feeling that in your heart space too, that love, that divine love. So then how do we respond in our world this way? when we're struggling, if we're struggling. So that's what integration means to me, is taking these downloads and integrating it into your everyday, especially when you're going through something difficult.
I love the simplicity, yet the potency of that definition holds, right? Because I know for me, whenever I have done medicine work, there is this universal, unconditional love that you get to tap into. And I think for me, the integration process was similar to what you were saying, like learning how to keep my awareness of, of that love in my everyday life without the help of the medicine constantly. And I think that's why some people turn to this medicine work and almost abuse this medicine work because they're searching for that within the medicine. But for me, my biggest lesson that I've gotten over and over and over again, whether I'm physically studying with medicine or whether it's just in meditation, is that we are the medicine and the ceremony is our life. And we learn how to bridge that through this integration process. And so when people work with you through integration, kind of what does a session look like? And, about to really be fully supported in integration, about how long is a commitment to work with an integration coach? I know it varies, from individual to individual, but just kind of like, the basic time period. What does that look like?
I don't know if there's a time frame. I mean, I think that if you are actively doing the work and truly integrating the downloads, you don't really need to see an integration coach too often, right? Because as you said, you are the medicine. My sessions are about 50 to 60 minutes long. And if you are in ceremony, we will definitely integrate that ceremony that you had the night before the next day, which gives us an opportunity then to figure out how, what intention you're going to set for the following ceremony, which can be very, very useful and very effective.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure that there, at least for me, that there really is a time frame. I mean, I think it's important, as we spoke about earlier, and if you are sitting with psychedelic medicine, this should be a must. This really should be a must, is sitting with an integration therapist or coach at least maybe 3 or 4 times. But I don't really see it as traditional therapy. In traditional therapy, you have to come once a week or twice a week for it to really be effective, right? But I think that's a little bit different with psychedelic medicine. I have some clients that come once a month, and that's okay too, because they're getting the most of those sessions.
Right. Yeah. And I like for me, I think it would have been helpful to kind of have a situation like you're describing where I could sit in ceremony with you and also integrate with you so that you're the same person. So you were there with me in ceremony. You could sense and feel the energy and kind of what was going on. And then we can integrate that specific ceremony together. And so with your church, you also mentioned that you do a lot of small group healings or even one-on-one healings. And kind of what led you to be called to offer the smaller group ceremonies?
So the focus is mainly the one-on-ones, just because I think that it's so beneficial to be able to have that one-on-one attention. And when I host those retreats, it's like you have a live-in integration coach. I'm there available to you to talk and process about your journey whenever you need to. And what led me to do the smaller groups is that I wanted to offer something that was affordable as well for those that are looking for something that is a bit more affordable, but still intimate, still intimate. That's why I don't do more than 3 or 4 people at a time in a group. And I just started offering groups.
Interesting. Yeah, I think for me, I would have loved to have met someone like you because my first two ceremonies were pretty big groups. The last couple ceremonies I did were smaller. And it just feels like for me because I am so empathic, and I just like feel like sometimes I'm like a sponge. I've gotten a lot better at not being a sponge, but in ceremony it seems like I just can't help it. I'm just a sponge. And in those larger ceremonies, it's almost distracting for me because in everyday life, there's more like clear boundaries. But when you're in that ceremony space and everybody's in the medicine, I just, we're even more connected, or we're more aware of that connectedness, and like understanding what was mine and what was other people's sometimes was like impossible. And I would just sit there and get frustrated because it was hard for me to really like sink into the medicine when I was like feeling and hearing, like somebody would be across the room like whispering to a facilitator, and I could hear like everything they were saying. And then like, when other people would purge, it would just make me feel weird. So
It
I would
was,
have loved to have done some small group one-on-one stuff.
thank you. So it sounds like it was difficult, for you to really dive in deep when it was that large of a group. And there's nothing wrong with large ceremonies. I think it's a beautiful way, as I said earlier, to build community.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that works for some people, but for those that are so very sensitive to energy, that's why I offer this as well, because there are people that do require a smaller, more intimate group. And then the other thing that I do with the small groups, which is what I did with our last ayahuasca circle retreat, was so they journeyed Friday nights. And then Saturday, I sat with each individual participant, with each individual guest. And they had their own 50 to 60-minute one-on-one integration session with me. And that helped a lot because then they had a better idea of what intention to set for the next ceremony and how to navigate that.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
then before
so
they left on Sunday, I met with them again, each one, and they had their own personal integration session with me on Sunday after that second ceremony.
yeah,
And
and
then
that's
they,
so beautiful, I think,
thank you.
for sure. And
That's such an important piece. That's such an important piece, that integration piece.
yeah,
Yeah.
and to have that the access to you like right then and there, because I think right after ceremony, everything is like the freshest. And so to be able to sit and digest and break apart things that happened and then get more clear on an intention for the following ceremony. And that was going to be one of my questions was, do you do just one ceremony or do you do two, which I think is usually pretty typical for a weekend. And
Mhm.
do you find yourself working more with men or women, or does it just depend?
With the one-on-ones, it could be a little bit of both. And they come from all walks of life. I mean, I've sat with individuals from the Orthodox Jewish community, and that's been a beautiful experience as well. Um, yeah, from all walks of life. And Tigress Temple is actually going to be hosting in February a co-ed ceremony
Mm.
with ayahuasca. And yeah, so I guess you could say both. I work with both.
Okay. I was just wondering because some people, feel called to work with one or the other. And I have, co-facilitated mostly co-ed ceremonies. I've never done one that's just a women's or just a men's. And so kind of backing up a little bit, like, yes, you do integration, but your own journey, right? So you felt called to work with the medicine and share the medicine, and you even, went down to Mexico to do the work. How did you, because I feel like sometimes people, they're curious about plant medicine, let's just say ayahuasca. Maybe they've done some research, maybe they've had some friends who do it. And a lot of times you hear people talk about they feel called, to the medicine, like the medicine calls them. And so, how did you feel this call for you? How did it show up?
That's a great question and a loaded one.
Right.
So, so for me, I've struggled with symptoms of depression, anxiety, PTSD forever,
Mm,
um, forever, and from my own traumas. And so, there were days that I felt like lead, like my body felt like lead, and I just
mm,
couldn't get out of bed.
mm,
And that was the depression. I didn't want to be a mother. I didn't want to be a stepmother. I didn't want to be a wife at the time I was married. I just didn't want to be in my skin. I wasn't suicidal by any means, but it just wasn't there was something in me that knew this cannot be the way to live this life, this
Mm.
experience. This cannot be it. So I started to look for alternative medicines because I did go on SSRIs once when I was in my undergrad. But
Mm.
honestly, they made me feel numb. They numbed me out from all emotions. So that wasn't very effective. And we know now that SSRIs are really just a mask. It's not really going into the root of why we're behaving and responding in our world the way that we are. Um, so really it was my own trauma and my own yeah, my own traumas and the PTSD and the depression and anxiety that I was living with that led me to the medicine. So I
Mm.
started to first research ayahuasca. But I started reading about all these shamans that were taking advantage of women, and I was like, well, that kind
Mm.
of defeats the whole purpose of why I'm healing.
Mhm.
Um, my trauma was sexual trauma too. And so I started to research women, female shamans, and I came across
Mm.
curanderas and the story of Maria Sabina and the mushrooms and the Mazatec's in Mexico. And I was like, okay, this is where I need to be. I ended up watching a documentary, um, and I got in touch with the director of the documentary, asking him for help if he could lead me to that woman in Mexico. And he happened to be out there. And so he introduced me to that beautiful curandera that was 86 years old at the time, who had been
Mm.
practicing and healing
Wow.
people in village with the medicine for over 40 something years. And that's how I started my healing journey. That's what called me. Just a knowing, like, no, this
Mhm.
cannot be the way to live this experience. Like, I'm sure we weren't created to live in a state of misery 24.
Mm.
This can't be it.
Yeah, I thank you for sharing that. I know, like you said, it is kind of a loaded question, and it's like, how deep do you want to get? But I can relate. So, most of my life I felt relatively normal, I guess, like I have always been really emotional, but it's like I was fine with, crying a lot or whatever. I figured out ways to handle it. I just accepted that that was me. But then, when I started college, for some reason, like well, I know the reason, but anyways, I was just like super anxious all the time. And I had never experienced anxiety in my life. And it was debilitating. And it was hard to like learn new information and like, and I'm in college and like it was hard to be present with friends. And I remember doing like yoga and stuff like that, and like nothing was helping. And then it would just randomly go away, right? For like several months to a year, and then it would come back. And then it started to be combined with depression and all these things. And I was on medication as well. I went to therapy, but I wasn't ready to really face the darker side of that healing journey. I just kept wanting to show up to therapy and talk my problems away. Right. I just want to talk about it and I want that to be enough. And I want to take this medication and I want to be fine.
Yeah.
And so a partner that I had at the time, when I was having probably my biggest like flare up of depression and anxiety, went to go do ayahuasca up in Washington, some church. I don't think they exist anymore, but anyways. And long story short, when he told me about the medicine, there was a part of me that was like, maybe, but when he explained the experience, I was like, there's no way I'm doing that. I'm just going to have to find something else. Right. And then
Hmm.
about 6 months later, I went to a drum making workshop and made a drum and I was drumming. And our instructor, she mentioned, you have this drum that you built is more than an instrument. It's a relationship to the spirit world. And your drum will, talk to you and speak to you in different ways. Like it's not just a drum. I'm like, whatever, because I wasn't really spiritual at the time. And I was just like, okay, she's just full of crap. And about a week later, I went home and I started playing my drum. And like the beat of the music, it sounded like my drum was like chanting ayahuasca to me. And I was like, well, okay. And then the place that I was interested in going to, because it was the only place I knew at the time, was actually going to have a guest shaman from Peru. And so I felt like I was supposed to be there at that particular ceremony. And yeah, long story short, I ended up getting there, even though it was not easy because they like didn't have spots, but then a spot opened up literally like 4 days before the ceremony. And
Oh,
I
wow.
knew, and I already knew that I was going to ceremony. So I was already doing the diet and all these other things because I just knew that a spot was going to open up. But yeah, so it's like there's this calling and this knowing, but I think it starts with like there's got to be something more to life. Like, God created us in his image and to be happy and joyful and to be living in love, not living in hate and anger and fear all the time. And so I think, for a lot of us more sensitive people out there too, we feel so much. And I think ayahuasca really taught me what's really my work to do and what's not. And that was a huge shift in my life.
That's beautiful. As you said, especially when you're so sensitive and you tend to pick up on, ah, the traumas and the emotions of others, it's really important to discern what is yours and what should I be working through so that I can be, more of that mirror to others. And as a therapist, I think that that work is so important to be able to sit with the medicines yourself, but also to do your inner work because you are serving as a mirror to other people, helping to mirror their own emotions, their own thoughts, their own dysfunctional behavior. Yeah. I was in therapy too. I was in therapy for over 10 years trying to work through my sexual trauma. Over 10 years. I think we made maybe a dent, maybe. And it wasn't until I started exploring psychedelic medicines that I really started to heal, truly heal. Like I remember my therapist would tell me that your trauma was a gift, but I was like, I mean, whatever.
Right.
And it wasn't until my first toad medicine ceremony that as I was coming back from that as I was coming back, I don't even know how to describe it, but I heard it in a whisper, your trauma was a gift. And it connected to the heart space. And I truly understood, holy shit, this is a gift. This is a gift. How am I supposed to help others if I haven't lived in this darkness myself? And so that same day, I hugged my perpetrator and I said, I love you. And I meant it. I was so grateful. So grateful. But yeah, these medicines have a way of connecting and knowing that we have up here to the heart space, so that we can truly feel it in here and know that that is our truth, truly our truth.
Absolutely. And it comes back to that integration. There's so much talk too in the plant medicine community about like ego death, and we're not our ego, and you need to learn to surrender and like die to your ego and all this stuff. And for me, like that just never fully resonated. I think it's more about, like we've been talking about, the integration of mind, body, and spirit. We are mind, body, and spirit. And to cut off the mind is to cut off a part of ourself. It's our free will, and it's what gives us our uniqueness, right? It filters source through our own unique lens, which combines the trauma and everything that we've been through. And because I have been through so much in my life, and I still feel like really young. And, I've had sexual trauma, anxiety, depression. I've gone through really messy divorce. I've dealt with eating disorders, anxiety, depression. I'm a cancer survivor. And it's just like the list goes on and on. And for the longest time, I'm just like, what is all of this? And then getting to the root of some of that stuff, through ayahuasca work. And just, yeah, like you said, it's every experience that we go through is a gift when we choose to see it that way, and when we choose to see it through the lens of the heart. And it's really, I could, as a white female, sit and, facilitate an ayahuasca ceremony and have no experience with dealing with shadow work and darkness. Or I can, embrace all of that and bring it to ceremony with me. And that's kind of what she's been teaching me is, if you really truly want to dive into medicine work and facilitate for other people, you have to know what you're doing on a really deep level so that you can meet people where they're at. And when they have a complication or something that comes up during integration, you can not just say, I've been there too, but genuinely mean it and know where they're coming from. We can't hold space for something we haven't gone through. We can try and we can do our best and we can have compassion, but it's very different having gone through that. So thank you for sharing some of your story and for showing up and for being there for people with this really powerful, potent, beautiful work that is plant medicine.
Thank you. I'm glad that you mentioned the ego and shadow work. Because one of the things that I focus on with clients is, and we mentioned the integration piece and how to live through the lenses of love, right? With the ego, as you said, there's this talk of ego death. And it's like, well, no, we don't want to kill the ego. We need to get to know our ego so that we know when our shadow selves are present and when our light self is present, and how we're navigating an experience in our life. Is it with the ego? Is the shadow self at the wheel navigating this, or is it our light self navigating this through the lens of love? That's what that I just published a journal called Loving Myself Completely on Amazon, and it's on light and love. It's the light and shadow self journal.
Oh,
And
beautiful.
thank you, and it's a tool to help you discern, who's at the wheel daily. Who's at the wheel? You've got to be aware of your shadow self, otherwise you don't know. And I think that part of the beauty of this medicine too, of psychedelic medicine, is that it does bring forth to the mind's eye, those dysfunctional thought patterns or those dysfunctional behaviors. And that's the key to change it. You have to be aware first that it exists, the dysfunction, in order to change it. And I know we were talking about this earlier. The plant medicine isn't going to change it for you. It's going to bring to your awareness what needs to be looked at so that you can then put in the work. It's a wonderful tool to alleviate yourself of symptoms of depression and anxiety immediately, because I did experience that with the mushrooms in Mexico. I mean, my depression was lifted. It went from like a 1, which was from 0 to 10, 0 being really, really bad, and 10 being non-existent. It went from like a 1 to about, I would say, a 10. I
Wow.
wasn't experiencing symptoms of depression. I was married at the time, and I remember lying in bed with my husband and telling him, I don't know what tomorrow brings, but I'm so excited. I cannot remember the last time that I felt like that before plant medicine, you know? So it's a wonderful tool to alleviate ourselves of symptoms of depression and anxiety right away. But you still have to do the work. And part of that means truly getting to know your shadow self so that you know who's at the wheel navigating life and your experiences.
And yeah, all of that really resonates with me. And I think what helps me the most is remaining, instead of being so judgmental of the shadow self and or the ego, is just like you said, kind of remaining curious. Like, okay, who's at the wheel right now? Is it like my higher self? Is it my light body? Is it my shadow self? And just like, oh, okay, that's interesting. I feel like it's probably my shadow self in this moment, and or I'm being triggered. And just, looking at it, because we came here to be on the planet at this time to experience what it's like to be human.
Right.
And I think ayahuasca has taught me that my emotions as a human being are not bad, and they have never been bad. And I get to feel everything and, just roll with it and move through it. And she always tells me the question why is like the worst question you could ask in a situation like that. Like, why am I feeling this? Where did it come from? Like, yes, sometimes that can be helpful, but it's just helpful for the mind. And when we really just need to get into the body and feel things. We don't always need to know why we're feeling how we're feeling. Most of us have so much trauma, and a lot of that is still repressed. Or even if we do remember, because um, I am currently blending pharmaceuticals with herbs and treatment and various different things for some things that I've been experiencing. And I absolutely love my current psychiatrist. Like, she's all about, if we got to use pharmaceuticals, okay, but there's also all of these other supplements we can take to support the body as well. So it's like she blends things really beautifully. But one day I was having a bout, I hadn't had issues with anxiety in like years. And then all of a sudden it started to surface again. I remember telling her, and I just don't know why I'm anxious. Like, my life is not that stressful. I love my job. I love the people I'm around. I'm in a relation, and she's just like, you don't always need a reason to be anxious. You've had, a lot of trauma in your life. And sometimes, healing is not always linear. So like she was just like, give yourself permission. Like it's okay. You haven't like failed because now all of a sudden you're experiencing anxiety. You're not,
Yeah.
and that's another thing ayahuasca's really taught me is during one of my ceremonies, like nothing was happening. I was just like sitting there. Some visuals would come for like a second and then nothing. And I'm just like sitting there. And then I'm like, I remember thinking, what am I doing wrong? And she just came to me and she's like, you're not doing anything wrong. Maybe you just need to sit here with your emotions right now. And that's when my inner child came through. And I was like, oh, okay, I see what's happening. I see what you're doing now.
Mhm.
Taking away all the other stuff so that I'm forced to sit with my inner child right now. And for whatever reason, I didn't want to. And it was just interesting, but I'm kind of feel like I'm going all over the place. But just to say, being a human is a really special, unique experience that we can only experience, on this planet at this time. And plant
Yeah.
medicines are here to help support us in not being less human, but being more human. And I think embracing all of those parts. In the beginning of the spiritual journey, it's so easy to be like, oh, well, I am not my body. I am not my thoughts. I am not my mind. I'm all of this. I'm like, yes, that's true. But we still have these bodies that we need to nurture, care of, or we're not going to be
Mhm.
able to be here to do all the things that we want to do and to fulfill our missions and things of that nature.
I definitely agree with you. Part of being on this planet and incarnating as humans is so that we can experience and grow through these emotions. Emotions are like our spiritual compass. They're there to teach and guide us. Um, yeah, so to and I that's something that comes up a lot with clients. I think a lot of us were raised to not feel, to not feel emotion or to be responsible for the emotions of others. Like, what? Oh,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely not. Some of us are working through that, but emotions are such a vital part of this experience. We are such energetic beings, and emotions are energy. We have to allow them to flow through us.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
I mean, you look at toddlers and infants, they feel something and they don't question it. They just feel it.
They
And
just
then,
feel it.
a kid might fall, scrape their knee, cry for 10 minutes, and then be laughing, playing, a few minutes later because they just allowed themselves to feel all of that pain at once and then, just move through it.
I love that. I love that analogy of the toddlers. They really don't question, why am I hurting right now? They just allow themselves to feel. Yeah, that's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So with all of the work that you're doing with other people and holding space and helping them integrate and also doing ceremonies, how do you yourself stay, grounded enough or just in general so that you can continue to show up fully for all of these people that you serve in your community?
One of the most important things for me is creating boundaries, um, and honoring time for myself, right?
Mm.
Rest time for myself, and knowing that resting doesn't mean that I'm being lazy. It's just me filling my cup again. It's
Mm.
the most interesting experience for me, because when I have a client come sit with me one on one, like, I'm drained because I am 110% present with them the entire weekend. So yes,
Mhm.
I'm drained, but my cup is so full. My cup is so full because this is my passion.
Mm.
This is my passion. I know that the purpose of the soul that resides in this vessel is to teach others how to heal. And it has been doing it for eons, eons. So I understand that. And I think that's why I feel so fulfilled when these clients leave. And I light a candle and I pray. Sometimes I'm so overwhelmed with gratitude that I'm crying.
Mm.
But it does get, it does definitely take a toll on you. So for me, honoring boundaries with myself, knowing that I have to give my that time to myself to rest. And if it means that I'm not communicating with anybody, then that's exactly what that looks like. That's
Mm.
okay. You know,
Mhm.
I was also taught that it was a good idea to sit out on the earth and let the earth just absorb any
Mm.
of that stagnant energy that you may have absorbed from the
Mm.
clients. That's another wonderful tool.
Mhm.
But I would say really that's mainly what I try to do to fill my cup, is just honoring my time alone once
Mm.
I with clients anymore. Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so important because I think for some people, when you are living your purpose and you're doing what you're supposed to do, it's draining yet energizing at the same time. And so some people, I think, just want to keep going and going and going, but stop. You remember that rest is not lazy, that we rest so that we can do more. We can show up, and rest is so hard for me. It was like the other day, my boyfriend was over and we were just like laying down, just enjoying each other's company. And I remember after about 15 minutes, I just shared with him, I'm like, I noticed that I'm feeling anxious. And he
Mm.
was like, why do you think that is? And it's like, because I'm resting and I need to go to the store and get groceries so I can cook soup for dinner. And it's like 1 in the afternoon. Like dinner is not, you know what I mean? And he was just like, it's okay. Like just be here with me now. And we're not gonna lay in bed all day. And even if we did, like it's
That's okay.
okay. And I'm
That's
just like,
okay.
and I think a lot of it too, I've had a lot of loss this year. So I've lost both my dad and my grandmother. And
Oh,
I
sorry.
think I've been staying busier than usual so that I don't have to like feel those really heavy emotions. And he's just so funny because he can like see straight through it. But you can tell he's wanted to bring it up for a while, but he hasn't. But then the other day he was like, yeah, like you're just so busy. Like, when are you supposed to process anything? When are you gonna have time to miss your dad if you're always doing something? And I'm like, yeah, you're right. Like I do need to slow down, not just to avoid burnout, but so that I can, sit with and
Right.
process things. And I think, sometimes I've done that like post ceremony as I've just jumped right into the next thing without integrating before too, just because it's like it's a little intense in the moment. So I'll just feel it later. But I've noticed the longer I suppress it, the stronger it is when it finally does come out, and the harder it is, the longer it lasts. Like if I feel some grief and I just set aside up to 20 minutes to feel it in that moment, it's a lot easier to deal with than it is if I'm dealing with it months or even years later.
Yes. Yes. I love that you set aside time, because this is often a suggestion that I've had to make to clients that aren't used to sitting with their emotions, that are constantly keeping themselves busy so that they don't have to explore these uncomfortable emotions. But yeah, sometimes it's important to set aside time, like actually scheduling time to sit and feel, and just
Mm,
sit and feel. I'm
absolutely.
sorry for your loss.
Thank you. Yeah, and I've noticed I used to work with Hape a lot, and that would help me get into that habit of sitting and meditating and being with my feelings and thoughts. And then I stopped working with it for a couple years, and I noticed that I stopped meditating as much. And I stopped, I would do yoga sometimes, but I would like rush and I wouldn't stay in Savasana. And so lately I have been carving out, 10 to 20 minutes to just sit with whatever's present and get back into that habit of allowing time to just ask my body, like, is there anything you need from me right now? Asking my inner child, checking in on her, just is there anything you need in this moment? Is there anything you need to feel that you haven't felt like you've had a chance to feel? And so I love that, with clients, you're working on that. And so also kind of bringing it back to you, what are some of your like go-to things that you do when you know that you need to recharge and rest and or do this allowing yourself to process things that may have happened recently?
Sometimes I journal. I used to journal a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
I came across my diary when I was 8 years old. So I used to journal a lot more. Um, I think just sitting in meditation and allowing myself to just observe what arises with me. And also, when I'm sitting with clients, it's the most interesting experience, because sometimes clients will come to me with certain issues and it's almost like they're mirroring me.
Mm,
So now we're both healing, you know? I'm
right.
present for them and this is their ceremony, but yeah, for me there's still some stuff to process for myself once they leave, because they're mirroring things for me that I'm like, "Oh wow, I
Mm,
need to look." for myself. So yeah, I think the awareness is probably the first thing in processing anything, is having that awareness. And then if I need to process in my journal, I might sit in meditation. Yeah.
And I like that
And if I have a friend that I can
simple.
talk to, I call
Yeah.
friends.
Calling a friend. Yeah, that's a good one. And I
Often as
love
a therapist, you don't really do
how,
much of the talking. You
mm,
do a lot of the listening.
uh-huh. Yeah.
So it's to
And
have friends that can hold that space for you.
mm, yeah, and I love how simple it is. It doesn't have to be this complicated 10-step process, that you do. And it can be as simple as journaling or just sitting and meditating for 5-10 minutes or doing yoga or sitting on the earth, like you said. And that's something that I really love to do. And I haven't been doing as much of because it's been really cold.
Yes.
like like so cold. I'm just like, I don't even want to
Yes.
be outside right now. I don't want to do
Yeah.
anything. But
Oh, that's
it's
great.
starting to warm back up. So yeah, I think I need to just before it starts raining again, I need to just like
Mm-hmm.
sit on the earth for a little bit. But yeah, thank you so much for being on the podcast, for sharing some of your story, some of your wisdom. And of course, the last little bit is just how can people get in contact with you to know more about your ceremonies and or your integration coaching?
Yeah. Okay. So for the ceremonies, it's through the church, Tigris Temple, and you can reach out to me at tigristemple222@gmail.com. I'm on IG and Facebook. Um, and then for integration, that's Mindful Journey with Yuleisy. And I have a website www.yuleisycardoso.com, and you can book you can read more about my experience on the website and a little bit more about myself and the services that I offer. So, I mean, if you're looking for therapy, regular therapy or integration therapy, I offer both.
Wonderful.
And
And we'll have Mhm.
that would be mindfuljourney19@gmail.com. For both, you can reach out to me at 904-325-6762.
Right. And we will have all the information in the description as well, in case you can't remember what was said or you just want to be able to have a clickable link. It'll all be below in the description. And thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your support. This is it for this episode. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Yay.